Shopify is one of the leading e-commerce platforms that exist nowadays. A lot of businesses build their online store with Shopify, which offers an amazing experience from selling and shipping to processing payments. They also offer a lot of templates for non-developers, but in this tutorial, we'll learn how to create our Shopify store, connect it with our Gatsby frontend, and create a checkout process using Shopify's package. You can find the completed project code on GitHub at this link here that you can also find in the text content below. You can also clone this project, but remember to add your own password and store URL in a .env file for the project to build successfully. You can view the live demo at gatsby-shopify-tutorial.netlify.app, and you can also find this link in the text content below. Why should we use Shopify? Unlike Stripe, which needs you to set up a backend server, Shopify takes care of all the backend logic for you, so you can just focus on the front end. Shopify comes with 3 different pricing plans, and you benefit from a 14 days free trial once you sign up. It's super easy to implement Shopify with our front end, even more so if you're using Gatsby. In section 2 of this tutorial, we will learn how to use the gatsby-source-shopify plugin to connect Shopify with our website. To implement the checkout experience, we'll learn how to use the Shopify API NPM package. Before connecting Gatsby to our Shopify account, we'll need to create an account in the store if you don't already have one. So head over to shopify.com and create an account by clicking on the Start Free Trial green button at the top right corner. Then we'll need to create our first online store. In my case, I already have one store created, but if you don't have any store, you will simply see the button in the middle of the screen. So let's create a new store. We'll click on Create Another Store or click on Create New Store, and then give your store a name. I will name this store Design Code Demo. Then click on Create Store. And now we'll need to wait for Shopify to create our store. It might take a few minutes. Then we'll need to fill in a few forms, and that's pretty easy, so just fill in the form. Now you should land on your dashboard. On the right side, click on the Apps tab. Here we'll need to create a private app, so scroll down to the bottom and you'll see a little text that says Working with a developer on your shop. Manage private apps, so we'll click on Manage Private Apps. Then we need to enable private app development for our store, so let's click on the button, and on the next screen, we'll need to check all 3 boxes. It will state that you understand the risk of enabling private app development, so click on Enabled Private App Development. Now that we enabled private app development, we need to create a private app, so let's click on that. Now we have a few sections to fill in. So under app details, you need to provide a private app name, and you can choose any name that you wish. So in this case, I will write Design Code Demo, and then fill in your emergency developer email. Under the Admin API section, click on Show Inactive Admin API Permissions. Then for each row, we'll need to change to read access, and we'll need to do the same for each row. Once you're done changing all the rows to read access, we're now at the Webhook API version. I will keep it as is, and right now I am using the version from October 2021. Then under the Storefront API section, check the box to allow this app to access your storefront data using the Storefront API. Remember to also check the Read Product Tags as well as Read Customer Tags boxes. Once you're done, click on Save. In the model that appears, click on Create App, and this can take a few minutes to create your private app. Great, you can see that our private app has been created successfully. Now scroll down to the Admin API section and you will see that we have a new block here. We have our API key, our password, an example URL, and a shared secret. In our case, we will need to copy the password URL and the store URL. If you don't know what the store URL is, just take a look at the URL bar at the top, and my store URL will be designcode-demo.myshopify.com. So simply copy this and copy the password because we will need it in the next section. Now it's time to add a few products to our Shopify store. So click on the Products tab and we'll need to add our products. So click on Add Your Products. We'll need to fill in the Add Product form to add a product to our store. You can head to unsplash.com to get random pictures of products if you don't have any. So I filled in my product information, I have my media, and I also have my pricing. You can fill in the rest if you want, but they're all optional. Then click on Save and repeat this step a few more times to add a few more products to your store. Once you added all your products to your store, we're ready to code. Head over to the Gatsby and React section of this handbook to learn how to create a new Gatsby website from the terminal if you don't already have one. Once you created your Gatsby project, open your code editor. So since I'm using VS Code, I can do code dot, hit enter, and it will open my code editor. Now let's install the Gatsby Source-Shopify plugin. We will run npm install gatsby-source-shopify and then hit enter. In the meantime, let's go back to our code editor. We'll add the password we copied from Shopify in our store URL in an environment file. Let's right-click and create a new file. This file will be named .env, and this is where we will store all of our API keys. It's best practice to store them in an env file that will be ignored and not committed to GitHub, because committing API keys to GitHub is a big security flaw. So first, we will add the Gatsby Shopify password. You can find this password by going to your Shopify dashboard, then clicking on Manage Private Apps, clicking on your private app name, and then under Admin API, you can copy your password and then paste it next to Gatsby Shopify password. Then we also need to add our Gatsby Shopify store URL, which will be equals to the link on my Shopify dashboard. In my case, it will be designcode-demo.myshopify.com. So I'll copy this and paste it here. Then I'll save this file. Make sure that the .env is included in your git ignore file. So in my case, it's included on line 55 if you use the Gatsby starter default template. This will tell GitHub to ignore the .env file when we're committing to GitHub. Make sure that the Gatsby Source Shopify plugin has been successfully installed. Then in your code editor, open the Gatsby config file. We will need to configure the plugin to connect with our Shopify account. So at the bottom, right before the closing tag of the plugins array, we will add a new object. For the resolve key, we will provide gatsby-source-shopify, and then we also need to provide the options object. In here, we need to pass our password, which will be process.env. And then we will copy the Gatsby Shopify password variable and paste it here. And we also need to provide a store URL, which can be accessed with process.env. And then we copy the variable for the store URL in the .env file and paste it here. Then let's save it. And if you Gatsby develop now, you might run into an error saying that you need to specify a password and a store URL. To fix this, we need to add a line at the top of the Gatsby config file. So we'll do require.env.config. This will tell the Gatsby config file to look into our env file. Now let's run Gatsby develop to make sure that the setup is correct and the app compiles successfully. If your app compiles successfully for development mode, you can head over to the next step. If not, make sure that you added the required.env line in your Gatsby config file and that you connected your Gatsby project to your Shopify account. Once your build has been successful, head over to your browser and go to localhost 8000. You can see here that I already coded my home page, and you can find this code in the GitHub repository that I mentioned before, and you can find this link in the text content below. Now what we need to do is to fetch all the products from Shopify, and it's quite easy because it's a simple GraphQL query. So with your development server still running, head over to localhost/2_GraphQL. This is the Gatsby GraphQL interface, and this is where we can test out our GraphQL queries. To query all the Shopify products, we will be using the All Shopify product node. So expand this. What you can do is expand the nodes on the left panel here, or you can also write. So I prefer to write them, so I will write. So I will open curly brackets, and then I want to get the nodes. For each node, I want the title. I also want the handle, the variants object, and inside of this object, we want the Shopify ID. The Shopify ID will be useful in the next section when we will be coding the checkout part. Then we want the price range version 2 with the max variant price and the amount. You can see that right now, all of my lines are not aligned, so we can click on Prettify and everything will be aligned. We also want the description of each product, the images array, and for each image, we want the source file. Now click on play and you'll see the results printed on the console. If you're satisfied with that, we can move on to the next step. Now go back to your code editor and we will be creating a products page listing all the products we queried with the GraphQL query we just tested in our browser. So under the source folder, I will go into the pages folder and create a new file. This file will be named products.js, meaning that the users will be able to access this page by going to yourwebsite.com/products. Now let's define our products component. So it will be const products will be equal to a callback function, And for now, we will return an empty div. Then don't forget to export default products. At the top of this file, we need to import GraphQL from Gatsby. So we'll import GraphQL from Gatsby. Then right below our export default, we'll need to add the GraphQL query we tested before. So we'll do export const query is equals to GraphQL, and we will open a string literal. Inside of this, we will add curly brackets and go to our GraphQL interface and copy everything inside of my query. Then paste it in my code editor. Now let's save this file. By adding this query in the products file, we can access it with the data props in our products component. So we can do data, and then we can console log data to see if we get anything in our website. Since we're using JSX here, don't forget to also import React at the top. Let's save this file, and let's go to localhost 8000. So in my header here, I already linked this page to the products page, so I can simply click on that. And right now it's an empty page, so that's normal. We'll be adding the content later on. Let's open the inspector tool and go to the console. We can see that we have an object printed here, and it's the all Shopify products object with the nodes, and the nodes is an array of 3 products, and these 3 products are the ones that we added in our Shopify store. Now let's go back to our code editor and we'll create a product card component, and each product card will accept a product as a prop, and it will display all the information of that product. Under the components folder, I will right click and create a new file. This file will be called productcard.js. Then what you can do is copy the product card that you can find in the text content below. So I already copied it, and let's save this file. If you plan on using the product card in the text content below, remember to npm install style components, because we're using style components in order to add CSS to our product card. Back in products.js, we will iterate over the products we got from the GraphQL query. And if you remember, in the console, we have the all Shopify product layer, and then we have a nodes layer. So what we can do to directly access the node is to do const nodes. It will be equals to data.allShopify product. Now, instead of returning an empty div, I will be returning the layout, which is the header and the footer from my website. Don't forget to import layout from the components folder and the layout file. Inside of the layout, we'll need to add a wrapper. So let's import a style component to style this wrapper. And at the bottom, we will define it. So const wrapper will be equals to a div. And then I'll just add a bit of CSS to style it. Then inside of this wrapper, we will iterate over the nodes array that we got from GraphQL. We'll add curly brackets, then do nodes. It's important to add a question mark because the nodes might be undefined and we don't want to run into any error. Then we do .map, and for each product, we also get the index. We will be returning the product card. So we can hit enter to auto import it in our file. And if it doesn't import in your file, don't forget to write this import line. So the product card requires 2 props. The first one is a unique key. In this case, we'll pass the index. And we also have our product that we need to pass to this component. Now I saved this file, and let's go back to our browser. You can see that we have our 3 product cards here. So in my product card, you can see that if I click on the add button, which is the green button at the top right corner, I will see an alert saying added to cart. We'll be changing that in the next section because we'll be adding the product to an actual cart. So let's test it. I'll click on the add button, and you can see that I have my alert here. Now, if we click on the content wrapper, which is everything below the add button, it will navigate to the product handle. So it will navigate to products / and then the handle of the product. If I click on the grounded coffee, you can see that it navigates to products / grounded coffee. And right now we have an error that says there's no page or function yet at this path here. So we will be creating that. Let's go back to our code editor, and we will need to create a template for each product we have in our store, since each one of them will have their own page. So under the source folder, we'll create a templates folder. And under that templates folder, we'll create a new file, and we'll call it product.js. This is where we will create our product page template. For now, I will copy and paste the code that I can find in the text content below. This template will accept a page context as a prop and will be able to get the product from the page context object and display the product title and the product description in our UI. So to get the page context in this page, we need to head over to the Gatsby node.js file. in the text content below, you can find the code that we need to use in this file. So I pasted it here. And the first thing we need to do is to require path, and we'll be creating pages with a GraphQL query. So here we have our GraphQL query, and we save that in a results variable. Then for each result, we're iterating over the nodes and creating a unique page for each result. You can see that the path that we specified for each product page is /products/ and then the handle of the product. And then we also specify the component, which is our template that we just created in the product.js file. And finally, we are adding a context object and adding the product in this context. So this is how we are able to access the product in our page context. Let's save the Gatsby node file, and you will see a message that says that localhost 8000 needs to restart. Click on OK and it will restart and rebuild your app because you changed something in the Gatsby node file. Now let's test out if everything works. Let's go to the products page and then click on any product. And you will see that we landed on our grounded coffee page. Right now, you can see that we didn't add any styling to this page yet. So let's add that. In our code editor, we will go back to the product.js page. You can add some styling with style component, and you can find this entire code in the text content below, or you can also style your own component. So we have a layout, which is the header and the footer of our website. Then we have a back button, and we're using navigate from Gatsby link. By adding -1, it will go back to the previous page in the user's history. Now we're displaying an image for each product and also all the information related to that product with an input form for the quantity that the user wants to buy. Finally, we have a primary button, and this component, I also created that in another file that says add to cart. When the user clicks on that, we'll show an alert that says added to cart for now. So let's save this file and go back to our browser, and you will see that we have our product page here. So I can change my quantity and I can add to cart, and for now it's only an alert. We'll be using the Shopify Buy NPM package from Shopify to create a seamless checkout experience. To use the Shopify Buy package, we will need to install two packages. So we'll do npm install isomorphic fetch as well as the Shopify Buy packages. Then we hit enter and it will install these two dependencies in our project. Next, we will need to get the storefront access token. Head over to Shopify's dashboard and click on apps. Then at the bottom, click on Manage Private Apps. Click on your private app name. Scroll down to the bottom to the Storefront API section. Then scroll down to the bottom of that section and you will see your Storefront Access token. Copy this token and then head to your code editor. We will need to add this variable in the env file. In here, we will add the Gatsby Storefront Access token, which will be equals to the one you copied on the dashboard. Then save this file. To create a checkout process, we first need to create a context. You can learn more about how to create a context by heading over to the Use Reducer with Use Context tutorials, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 of this handbook. So let's go back to our code editor and we'll create a new file under a new folder. So under the sources folder, we'll create a new folder, which will be called context. Inside of this folder, we'll create a new file called storecontext.js. And at the top, we will need to import three things. The first thing is import React, and we also need to import a few hooks. So we need to import create context, use state, and use effect from React. Next, we need to import fetch from the isomorphic fetch package we just installed, as well as the client from Shopify Buy. Then right below this, we need to create our Shopify client. So const client will be equals to client.buildClient, and it accepts an object with two keys. The first one is the domain, which will be process.env Gatsby Shopify store URL. The second one is the storefront access token, which will also be accessed with process.env, but the variable is Gatsby access token. And we also need to pass the fetch function as a second argument to our client. Now, right below this client, we need to create an object of default values. So we'll do default values will be equals to an object. We'll need this object later on for our checkout default state. So we'll have a cart, which will be an empty array by default. We will have a loading state, which will be false. We also have add variant to cart, which will be a function. For now, it's an empty function. Then we have remove line item, which is also an empty function for now. Then we have a client a checkout object. Inside of this object, we have the ID, as well as the line items, which is an array, and a web URL, which is also a string. Then we need to create a context. So we'll do const star context equals to create context with the default value object that we just created. Then right below that, we need two variables. One that lets us know if the build is for a browser, because we just want to enable checkout if we are in a browser. So we'll do is browser, and we check if the type of window is not undefined. That means that we're in the browser. Next, we'll also have a local storage key, which will be Shopify_checkout_ID. Then it's time to create our provider. So we'll export it because we'll need it outside of this file, and it will accept children as props. Inside of the provider, we need to create three states. The first one is the cart, and by default, it will be default values.cart. Then we also have a checkout, set checkout, use state, and by default, it will be default values.checkout. Next, we also have a loading state, and we'll set it to false. After we created these three states, we need to add a function. The first function we will add is the set checkout item. You can find this in the text content below. So this function will check if we're in a browser, and if we are, we will set the checkout ID in our browser's local storage and also set the checkout state. Then right below the set checkout item function, we will create a use effect. This use effect will check if we already created a checkout. If we are refetching that checkout object with the checkout.fetch. Otherwise, we'll create a new one. Then we need to add a function right below the use effect. This function is called add variant to cart, and it's a big function, but what it does is really simple. It's add an item to our cart. This function accepts two arguments. The first one is a product, and you also have a quantity. It's important to note that the add line items function from Shopify, defined on line 88 here, takes the Shopify ID from the variants array that we fetched with our GraphQL query before. We'll also update our Shopify cart with this line here and our cart state in this provider as well. Right after the add variant to cart function, we'll create another one again, and this one will be the remove line item. You can find all of these functions in the text content below. So this function accepts a variant ID as an argument. The variant ID is the Shopify ID from the variants object. Then in the line items array from the checkout project, we will find its corresponding line item ID, and we're setting it in the line item ID variable. Then we need to pass that to the remove line items function from Shopify, as well as the checkout ID to remove this item from the cart. And we're also updating our cart inside of our provider. At the bottom of the provider, don't forget to return the provider. So we will return star context.provider. And inside of the provider, we will pass the children. Don't forget to add the value object as a prop to our provider. We want to return all the default values, the add variant to cart function, the remove line item function, the cart state, the checkout state, as well as the loading state. Let's save this. Then we'll need to connect the star context with the use context hook. So right below our provider, we'll create a use store hook, which will be equals to a callback function. Inside of this, we'll create a context with the use context hook, and we'll pass the star context to it. Don't forget to also import it at the top of this file, because we forgot to import it. You need to check that if the context is undefined, we want to throw an error to the developer, else we will return the context. Then we'll export default use store. Let's save this file. Now that we have our store context as well as our store provider, we'll need to wrap our entire application in a store provider so that everything in our provider will be accessible everywhere in our application. So to do that, we will create a combined provider. Under the context folder, we'll create a new file and call this combinedprovider.js. Inside, we need to import React from React. Then we also need to import the store provider from the store context file. Then we'll create our combined provider, which will accept an element. We'll return the store provider with our element inside of that store provider. Then we'll export default combined provider. The elements is all the content of our website that we will pass to the combined provider and wrap everything in a store provider. Then let's go to the Gatsby SSR file, and in here we can remove the comments. We'll import combined provider from the combined provider file. Then we'll export const wrap root elements will be equals to the combined provider. So that means that everything in our application will be wrapped with our combined provider. So let's copy this because we'll also need to add this in our Gatsby browser. So let's save the Gatsby browser file. Now that we wrapped our entire application with our combined provider, we can do the UI part. So we will code the UI for the cart page. You can copy the components that you can find in the text content below or create your own. First, we'll need to create our product row. So under the components folder, I will create a new file, and this file will be called productrow.js. So here I simply pasted the component that you can find in the text content below. Next, we'll need to code the cart page. So under the pages folder, we will create a new file called cart.js. And you can see that we imported the product row here that we will need to add in here. Also, don't forget to go to your header file and add a link to the cart page if it's not done already. Let's go back to the cart page and let's import the useStore hook in this file. Then we will get the cart from our useStore hook, and we'll remove the comment and iterate over the cart instead. We want to check if the cart's length is higher than 0. If it is, we want to do cart.map, and then for each item, we'll display a product row. Don't forget to pass a key, which will be the index, as well as your item to your product row. If the cart length is 0, we want to display a text that will say your cart is empty. Now let's go to our browser and go to the cart page, and you can see that right now my cart is empty. Let's implement the add to cart functionality in our product cart as well as the product page. So first, let's go to our product cart component and we'll import the uStore from the store context file. Then we'll get the add to cart function from the uStore. On the add button, instead of showing an alert, we will do add variant to cart product, and we'll add the default quantity to 1, because when the user clicks on the add button here, we just want to add one item to our cart. Let's do the same for our product page. So let's go to the product under the templates folder, and in here, before importing the useStore hook, we'll need to use the use input hook that you can find in the use input hook section of this handbook, and you can also find the link in the text content below. So I added my use input hook inside of the utils folder, which is inside of the source folder. I'll close this, and in here, I will create a variable called bind, and I will call the use input hook. Also, don't forget to import the use input hook from the use input file. And then we will use the spread operator to spread everything in the use input. You might see an error from React that says that we cannot have a value as well as a default value because the use input hook returns a value here. So we'll need to remove the default value here. And for the default value, we will replace it by a 1 because by default, we want the user to add only one item to their cart. Then we'll need to import the use store hook. So let's import useStore from the store context file. And then we'll get the add variant to cart function from the useStore. And instead of showing an alert on the add to cart button, we will remove the alert and call the add variant to cart. Remember that it takes a product as well as a quantity. So we'll pass the product as well as the bind.value, which is from our use input hook. And this is the value that the user inputted inside of the input field. We'll also need to take care of the remove item from cart functionality. So this can be done on a product row. So let's go to product row, and you can see here that we have a delete button, which for now console logs a remove item message. So let's get the remove line item function from the use store hook. Then instead of console logging the remove item, we will call the remove line item function and pass in the Shopify ID from our product. To access it, we need to do product.variants, get the first one, and remember to add a question mark because it might be null. Then we'll do .shopify ID. Then let's save this. Let's test out the add and the remove from cart functionalities in our website. Let's go to our browser and add a coffee mug. And you can see that we have an alert here. This comes from the store context because we have an alert there once the item has been added to our cart. And then let's go to the French press product page and add it to the cart. And it's successfully added to the cart. Let's double check that by going to the My Cart page. And you can see that we have our coffee mug as well as our French press. Let's try to remove the French press. And you can see that it removed the French press from our cart. Now we want to take care of the checkout button. When the user clicks on that, we want to redirect them to the checkout page from Shopify, where they will be able to enter the contact and payment information. This is what a typical Shopify checkout page looks like. So let's go back to the code editor, and we want to redirect the user to the checkout page when the user clicks on the button. So let's go to cart.js, and we'll need to add the checkout from the useStore because this is where we save the Shopify checkout page. Next, we want to disable this button when the cart is empty. So let's add a disable prop, and this will be true if the cart.length is equals to 0. Then let's save this file. And right now you can see that my cart is empty and our checkout button is also disabled. Now, on click of this button will redirect the user to the Shopify checkout page. So instead of console logging redirect to checkout page, we will call window.open, and then we call the checkout object from the use store hook .web URL. Let's save this and head back to our browser. So I will add my grounded coffee to my cart as well as my French press. Now let's click on my cart and we will want to check out. So let's click on that and it opens a new tab. However, you can see that it's an error page stating that this store isn't taking orders right now. As stated in this thread in the Shopify community website, this error is shown because we're under the 14 days free trial period. To enable checkout, we simply need to upgrade to a paid plan, either the basic plan or something higher. Then the user will see the checkout page when they click on our checkout button, where they'll be able to fill in their contact and payment information. Congratulations, you just completed the Gatsby Shopify tutorial. We'll learn how to create our Shopify store, add products to it, connect the data to our Gatsby website, and create a checkout experience. You can now go ahead and build amazing e-commerce websites.